Welcome everybody to the CEPA Workshop. We're so glad you could join us today. I am Beth Biggs. I'm the program coordinator for the CEPA program at CAMFT. This is Debbie Simmons. She's one of our CEPA committee members. She's an excellent resource for applicants and providers, and just a really good person to have on the committee. So Debbie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be on the CEPA committee?
Okay, great. Hi, welcome. I'm glad that everybody's here. I've been on the CEPA committee since the very beginning of it, and I have a background in education as well as being a therapist in private practice. And the reason that I got on the committee is real important for me as an educator to know that we were offering quality courses to people who were in our profession. And a lot of the courses that are out there that are, all over the place, aren't necessarily quality. So by making sure that we've got goals and objectives and certain criteria was really important to me. So that's why I joined the committee, and I think it's been a great thing. I think the people who are offering courses today, they're really solid courses. So you guys are getting some really good courses when you take CEUs from CEPA providers.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been with CAMFT in the CEPA program for a little over a year. And I really enjoy the program. I really enjoy helping people. As you guys probably all know, if you were BBS providers, things have changed a lot. So it's definitely been a transition period. And people are frustrated and confused, but I've really enjoyed helping people kind of get used to the changes and answer questions. That's, I think, my favorite part of the job is just fostering somebody from the very beginning to you're approved, and it's kind of like we're both like, yay, we did it together. So I really enjoy this position, and hopefully this workshop will help people no matter where they are in the process, because we're going to go over things like BBS regulations for course content, as well as specific CEPA requirements for providers, and then kind of normal pitfalls in the application that can help people who haven't yet applied, but also people who have already applied and are providers. So that's what we're going to do. The way this will work is we're going to go through the presentation, and we're going to try to hold the questions until the end. I think that'll be easiest. So I recommend writing down the questions as you have them so that you remember them when we go to the question and answer session. And then after we get through that, Debbie is going to graciously offer her services on writing measurable learning objectives, which is an area that a lot of people have
struggle with.
Yeah. I think that's probably the number one area that applicants and providers struggle with is educational goals and learning objectives, what the difference is, and then how to make sure your learning objectives are measurable. So she will help you figure out how to write them, use examples. So that's a really awesome tool that you guys have here that you can take advantage of, that I highly recommend. So we'll do that at the end as well. You can stay afterwards and get help from Debbie. All right, so we're gonna get started here. If you do have a burning question that you can't wait, we'll take it, but try to hold everything until the end. Okay, so just an overview of what we're gonna go over today. Something that providers really need to know is the scope of practice for the BBS licensees, because the course content that you're offering has to be relevant to their scope of practice. So that's an area a lot of providers don't really focus on. And we're not going to go in detail about that. I'm kind of going to go through those slides pretty quickly, but you'll be emailed this presentation so you can go over it in more detail. Again, common problem areas for applicants and providers, the BBS regulations for course content, measurable learning objectives that Debbie will help with, and then citations and references. Okay, so as some of you probably know, the CEPA program manual is kind of the Bible for the CEPA program. It has all the program information, all the regulations for the program. For people that haven't filled out the application yet, the CEPA manual is an absolute necessity. A lot of the questions are really looking for information straight out of the manual, just kind of lists and things like that. So everybody should have a copy of that on their computer if they're a provider or somewhere close. This is the first page of the initial application, which might look familiar to some of you. Everybody needs to fill out the initial application, even if they were a BBS provider previously. It doesn't matter. The approval agencies didn't get any information from the BBS on providers. We, like CAMFT, for instance, purchased a list that just had people's names and addresses. That's all we have. So people often get confused with that, but everybody has to start from scratch. A little bit about the fee structure. So the initial application, there is a fee with that. It is $300, or if you are an individual provider, meaning you're the only instructor, nobody else is an instructor, and you're a CAMFT member, then you qualify for a $100 discount, which would make it $200.
Is it possible to Zoom this live?
We tried earlier and we can't,
I'm
make it
sorry.
any bigger.
But I will be emailing this out,
Yeah.
so don't worry about that. You will have access to this. This is also on the CEPA website. So, and that's camft.org/CE Provider. So again, $300 or $200 initial application fee, and then once you're approved, you'll get invoiced an establishment fee, and that's $300 for everybody. That gets you your provider number and your certificate. Then after that, whether it's a year where you have an application due or not, it's a flat annual fee. So again, it would be $300 or $200 if you qualified for the discount. And we will always send reminders to you when you owe money, and we give 3 months notice. So once you get through the first year, the initial application, you're good for 1 year, and then you need to fill out the first year renewal application, which some of you are going through or just went through. And then after that application is approved, then every 3 years you fill out an application. So once you kind of get to that point, you're kind of golden for a while. And again, we just send you an invoice every year to remind you to pay the annual fee. So this is the first year renewal application. Everybody who's a provider is required to fill this out. It is very similar to the initial application, but a lot shorter, which is nice. And again, we ask you to provide a sample course and the same sample documents as the initial application. So once it's kind of like, oh yeah, I remember this. And then we do ask you to provide a little more detailed information on your top 3 highest attended courses. So just a summary, the number of people who came, that kind of stuff. And then also just to keep in mind, once you get through those applications with your annual fee that you send in, we will send you a little list to just write down the title of the courses that you offered and the date and how many CEs they were worth. So just make sure you keep all that information, which you already do, I'm sure. Yeah, and then it's the same format with the first year renewal application. It goes to the committee for review. They do have up to 60 days, just as with the initial application, to review. So for initial applicants, I tell people 3 or 4 months in advance of when you hope to get your approval is a good target date, just because it takes a while to fill out the application. It does. And then once you submit it, it gets added to a queue for me to look at, and that can take up to a week depending on how much I have already in the pile. And then you might need to make some corrections, so you'd need to give yourself time for that process. And then once it's ready, then it goes to the committee, and that's when the 60 days starts. So that's why 3 or 4 months is good. We don't do expedited applications. We just don't have the ability to do that. So I get that question a lot from people, unfortunately. So same process with the first year renewal application. 60-day review time. But I will send notice to everybody 3 months in advance, so hopefully that's plenty of time for everybody. And Debbie, if you want to hop in at any
I will,
point,
no,
feel free to.
Yeah,
Cut me off.
I will.
Okay. All right, so here's just some application tips. As we discussed, you'd want to download the CEPA program manual, definitely. A big part of what we see is people not answering the questions in their entirety. Some questions have multiple parts to them, and it just seems like a big problem for some reason.
Yeah.
So really read the question and ask yourself, have I answered everything that they're asking here? And if there's a part of the question that doesn't apply to you, make sure you state that. Like if it's asking about how, you keep financial information secure and you guys don't charge, so you don't do finances, you should say that because the committee needs to know.
And putting not applicable isn't enough because we don't really know what that means. But I have found if you really follow the CEPA manual word for word, it guides you through every single question. And I think a lot of times people they read the manual and say, yeah, I know what this says. Then they go to the application and start filling it out, but they don't have the manual and the application there together a lot of times. And that could be a really important thing to do that could really help you.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And then just another tip is if the question gives you a note or a tip, when we revised the application, we tried to make this a little more clear, like you should say this. But if we're giving you a note or a tip, you should repeat that in the answer. So for instance, when it comes to general program information, question number 6 is if you have a change in your program administrator, what's your process? And the tip or note there says you must notify CAMFT within 15 days. That's huge.
Must include
you
that.
have to say that because that's part of the process and the regulations. So that's just for all applications, first-year renewals, 3-year renewals. That's a good tip for all of those. Okay, moving on. Okay, so another area that people struggle with is if they were previous BBS providers and they offered courses, they have their documents and they think, oh, they're asking for a course evaluation. Here, I'll just give this one that I offered from the BBS. But there are new requirements. And some of those come straight from the BBS regulations. When they decided to no longer approve CE providers, they did change the regulations. Made things a little more tighter. And then of course, CEPA and CAMFT have our own requirements. So for example, the course evaluation, there's a checklist in the CEPA program manual with required questions that have to be on the evaluation. So even though it might be a sample that you previously used, you have to update it so that it includes all the required questions. And we do provide templates on the website. And for example, the course evaluation, you can just go download that template. It's already done. No reason to recreate the wheel.
Right.
But I know some people have their evaluation that they like, and that's fine as long as it does incorporate the questions from the checklist. So I already mentioned about the templates on the website. Oops. And then another thing people forget to do a lot is to sign and date the application. The acknowledgement page is kind of your contract with us, stating, certain things that you're required as a provider. So we do have to have you sign that and date it. And an electronic signature is not sufficient, unfortunately. So a lot of people tell me, but if I'm submitting it by email, how do I sign it? There's a couple ways that you can do that. You can print that last page, sign it, scan it, and email it. You can fax it, or you can send it in the mail, as long as it's an actual signature and date. So having said that, we do prefer to get applications by email, just because it's faster, it's a little easier. When they come in the mail, sometimes they're paper clipped and stapled and double-sided, and if it comes via email, it's faster, it's easier for us to handle. We do everything
through email with the committee.
With the committee, everything's email. Some people have issues with a scanner or whatever, so if people need to send it in the mail, that's okay. You can do that. But we're gonna scan it and then make it electronic going forward, so that's that. And then, again, I mentioned the 3 or 4 months ahead is a safe bet for people. So this is the scopes of practice that I mentioned earlier that we're not gonna go through in great detail. It's a bit of reading and kind of technical stuff, but there's the scopes of practice in here for the 4 BBS license types that you'll be able to offer to with your CAMFT approval. So that's LMFTs, LCSWs, LPCCs, and LEPs. Every CE provider should know, look at these and be familiar with these. Because BBS regulations state that courses offered have to be related to the scope of practice. So when you get this via email, I would just go through and kind of familiarize yourself with these.
And that's something as a committee member that we're really looking for too. One of the first things is the course that you're offering, is it within the scope of practice, or is it, teaching basket weaving to relaxing therapists or something like that? So that we do look for that right at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of course content, that's our next section, and we're going to talk about what the BBS requires. This slide, this information is straight from the BBS regulations, okay, the wording. So the content of the course shall be based upon methodological, theoretical, research, or practice knowledge base. So let's just talk about that one for a second, because I think that's an area a lot of providers and applicants struggle with as well. So, a course can be based on more than one of these, which, some people select all the boxes.
For sure.
Yeah. But all courses do need to be based in these. And people's questions, I think, are what does methodological mean or what does theoretical mean? And I think kind of because if you Google these terms, you don't really get much, which is what I did when I first started. I was like, oh, Google couldn't answer this for me. So one of the committee members had kind of told me the way you kind of break this down is methodological is anything based on a method, okay? And then theoretical is anything based on a theory. And of course, research is obviously research. And then practice would be the instructor's own experience, clinical experience in the subject matter.
The thing that we're always looking for here too, particularly in regards to methodological and the theory-based ones, are what are your references? We want to see references that support the course, so that it's not just something that you're putting out there that's just sort of your own ideas. Okay, so that's what we always, and we send things back for is references are not included, and that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, and we will later in the presentation talk a little bit more about citations and references, but again, that's huge. That's a big reason for deferrals by the committee.
Right in that area, yeah.
And they are looking for actual, citations and references. So I think I have to send that back a lot for people that didn't put full references there. And then people always ask how many, and
we're not really looking for a number. We're really looking for, it's more the quality of the references and are they accurate?
yeah. So as long as it establishes kind of the knowledge base for the course,
right.
And you can, it's a reference that they could follow up on and say, okay, is this a legitimate, topic? Then I think that's really what they're looking for.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and then the next one is must demonstrate credibility through the involvement of the broader mental health practices, education, science communities in studying or applying the findings, procedures, practices, or theoretical concepts. Or it must be related to ethical, legal, statutory, regulatory policies, guidelines, and standards that impact each respective practice. So that's usually an either or, and a lot of people have questions about number one there and what that means, and I think people probably think a little bit too much into that question. It's actually, most courses probably fall under that. So anything in that broader mental health
area, right. And I know a lot of people tend to go for the ethical piece too. That comes up a lot. And I think that, so either one of those is really good. And most every topic that comes through falls under there. We don't usually, I don't remember turning people away too much for that one.
Yeah. And there's a question in the application that asks you to select which one of these your course falls under, and then it asks you to give a short description of why. And I think people skip that part a lot. They just check which one,
Yeah.
and they miss the give
why.
us an explanation of why. And that doesn't have to be super involved. It just needs to basically state why your course falls under, one of these. So it's usually a sentence or two or a paragraph
Yeah.
there. All right, so moving on. And then again, this is coming straight from the BBS regulations. So each CE course shall have written educational goals and specific learning objectives that are measurable and serve as the basis for an evaluation of the effectiveness of the course. So
We will spend time talking about that one.
we will. Again, that's a huge,
a big one, yeah.
huge one for most everybody, and even myself. I struggle. I was talking to Debbie about the measurable learning objectives. It's hard to get. So I think having Debbie here is awesome because you get
We're going to make it really easy,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And then an evaluation mechanism that allows each participant to evaluate the continuing education course. So that's the course evaluation that's required. So that comes straight from the BBS regulations. This also, the next one, a syllabus that provides a general outline of the course, what shall contain at a minimum the learning objectives for each course, and the summary containing the main points for each topic. So I guess the syllabus probably is another area that people have a problem with.
Yeah, and I think that may be connected to the goals and objectives too, because a syllabus usually starts out with what your course goal is, then you go into what the objectives are. And so if you understand that, then I think putting together the syllabus is a lot easier.
Right. And as long as your syllabus meets these minimum requirements, it's acceptable. Some people go kind of above and beyond with
Yeah.
their syllabus, and they put their references, they put reading material, they put other information about the course. But in order to meet these guidelines, and then of course the CEPA guidelines, it has to have these minimums. So an outline of the course, but it also has to have the main points for each topic. So some people will just put an outline, but they don't put the main points. It has to have both. And then another area that people kind of miss a lot is the educational goal should be labeled. It should be clear this is the educational goal or goals for the
Learning
course.
goal, yeah.
And then the specific learning objectives should be labeled, so it's clear what those are for people.
And it's not, a lot of times what I've seen is people will put their promotional material, whatever on their flyers or something, that they're putting that as their syllabus, and they're two very different things.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think most often previous BBS providers have to redo a syllabus because it didn't meet the minimum qualifications. And I always recommend as well for CE providers, because a lot of CE providers just have instructors come in and provide courses. Put a lot of this work on the instructor. A lot of this should be their responsibility. So you might want to have an outline or something that you send instructors saying, I need this from you, I need this from you, what are the knowledge bases for the course, I need citations and references from you, because that shouldn't be on you. That's their material, they constructed it. So I would do that, and then they really should be providing the syllabus.
Yeah.
That's a little tip there. And then also a mechanism that allows all participants to assess their achievement in accordance with the program's learning objectives. So again, the course evaluation. And the question that has to be on there is, were their learning goals and objectives met? So the CEPA committee and the CEPA program used to require you to list all the learning objectives in the evaluation, and was this met, yes or no, or rate it. And then we realized that some courses have many learning objectives.
It got crazy,
and
yeah.
that was a little unrealistic. So now you can list your specific learning objectives, and I think The committee likes to see that, especially if there's, 3 to 5 or something like that. But if you have more than that and you want to simplify, all you have to do is say, were the learning goals and objectives met? And of course, you're giving those to your participants in the syllabus, so they have those learning goals. Okay, and again, this is probably way too small for you guys to see, but we will have this available for you guys. So it's just an example of a course syllabus that one of our approved providers gave us permission to share. Some of our wonderful providers have said, I want to help other applicants, so you guys have permission to share this with them if they need some help. So this is just one that meets the minimum qualifications and is pretty good, and it's 2 pages. The second page is the general outline with the main points. So again, this will be emailed. All right, so we're going to play a little game throughout this presentation, and we have some yummy candy up here if people can answer these questions. So raise your hand if you know the answer to true or false. A course on social media and marketing for a practice can be offered for CE credit.
This is a hard one.
I don't know who was first.
Okay, go.
Okay.
True. Read bad business practices.
It's actually false. And this is, I know
This
the
is,
reason.
I said this is a tough one.
Yeah, the reason you guys didn't raise your hands all at once is because things have changed. These used to be able to be offered for credit and accepted by the BBS, but kind of over the years we saw this shift and them kind of being uncomfortable with this type of thing, and now they've made it really, really specific. So in the 2016 BBS newsletter, they put out this kind of information that says, no courses that are designed for the general public will count towards continuing education hours, and courses must be directly related to client-patient care, and the course educational goals and learning objectives must reflect that. So if the course is social media for your practice, that is, in their eyes, benefiting your business, and it's not directly related to the client-patient relationship. So people are really struggling with this. And then also self-improvement courses like yoga classes, which some of you might notice we have yoga being offered here at the CAMFT conference, which CAMFT is a BBS approved provider right now. And our number hasn't expired yet, but this is all changing. And now if you're gonna offer something like yoga, you have to be really careful with how you write the course educational goals and the specific learning objectives, because those have to directly tie back to the client-patient relationship. So for example, if the yoga class is about teaching yoga to your client to help them, with
Deal with anxiety or
right.
I use it a lot of times with clients as an adjunct to what they're doing in therapy, and to be able to say, okay, I've got somebody downstairs who's teaching a class on meditation or yoga because it's going to help you dealing with the anxiety issue that we're talking about in therapy. Something like that.
Something like that. So again, if you are an organization and you're hiring instructors, you as the provider, the holder of the CE number, you have to make sure that the course qualifies. So you'll want to really look at what they're proposing to you and make sure that it's kind of a fine line with things like yoga. You have to be careful. So you just want to make sure that again, it's really important the learning objectives and the goals tie back to that.
So what about if you had one on social media that was like a client resource page, where you were offering resources for your clients on a Facebook page? Would that?
I mean, again, it's a fine line, and I would also be worried about, CE courses have to be at least an hour. So can you fill that type of information in an hour?
Oh, easily. I mean, there's a lot of electronic stuff happening now that is electronic patient care and patient relationship stuff. And I'm wondering, is all that excluded, or?
You know what I want to do, because this is a really big topic, and I know I could see people want to jump in.
Right.
Can we hold the questions till the end, and then we definitely can come back to it?
I think that's good.
Okay.
And I know for the recording, some people couldn't hear the question, and it was about social media resources for clients. And we will go into more depth about that later. We're going to continue on with the presentation, but great question. All right. So now we're going to get into learning objectives, which is a beast.
Yeah.
And we do have a lot of slides here that we'll kind of go through a little bit, and then Debbie has a handout that she put together that we'll pass out for you guys with some key verbs and that helpful information. There's a website too as well. So I'll just kind of go through this, kind of read the slides a little bit. So a learning objectives is a statement about what students will be able to do when they have completed the instruction. A learning objective has 3 major components. It describes what the student will be able to do, the conditions under which they'll perform the task, and the criteria for evaluating student performance. So I think those are 3 important questions to ask yourself when you're writing learning objectives, or when you're evaluating learning objectives that an instructor submitted to you, because again, you as the CE provider will have to make sure that course meets the content. And I think that's something people are a little uncomfortable with now, because I think sometimes it's kind of embarrassing to go back to an instructor and say, well, you're sorry, but your learning objectives aren't measurable. Can you rewrite them? That can be kind of embarrassing. But again, you are the CE provider, it's your responsibility. And I think kind of as the last of the BBS providers expire and people either find CAMFT or another approval agency as their home, people are going to get more familiar with this, and kind of everybody is going to get on the same page. But I think we're still kind of in growing pain time period here. So again, just ask yourself these questions and see. And you can always use us as a resource.
Absolutely, yeah.
Debbie is really excellent about offering herself for questions.
Just for phone calls that come in, I'm happy to field any of those calls, and you just let Beth know, and I'd be happy to make a phone call to any of you.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of resources with CAMFT, so that's the good news. And then what Debbie's kind of go into more detail about, so I won't do too much right here, is the difference between a goal and a learning objective, and I think people struggle with that. So I'm going to kind of skip past this part. To write a learning objective, focus on student performance, not the teacher performance. So it's about the student and what they will be able to do. So focus on the product, not the process. So it's at the end of the course, what are they going to be able to do? And then terminal behavior, not subject matter, and include one general outcome in each objective. So 3 characteristics of learning objectives are behavior, criterion, and conditions. And again, I'm not going to go into great detail on this because I'm going to leave that to Debbie. But you'll get this PowerPoint presentation. And again, this kind of just keeps going through. It uses some examples here on appropriate learning objectives, and then of course inappropriate learning objectives, to kind of show you the difference between the two. And then it just further breaks it down a little bit more. And then it provides a checklist for writing objectives. So this is kind of a good thing to kind of have with you when you're writing your learning objectives. And then gives you kind of words to use, which Debbie's handout does as well. And it's a good idea to kind of stick to these words. Or words like these that make your learning objective measurable, because that's a huge part of it, measurable. So just kind of the summary here I'll read. A learning objective is a statement of what students will be able to do when they have completed instruction. Learning objectives have their roots in the instructional analysis and the definition of entry behaviors. They form the basis of subsequent instructional design activities. So I think, all right, Debbie, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm gonna pass out that handout. So everybody gets scared when they hear about learning objectives and learning goals and what that means, and they hate to write them. And I really like this stuff because my background is in education. I've been an educator for most of my career. So I've done curriculum development, so I like doing this. And it's really not that difficult if you sort of separate it out. Your goal is your overall, what do you overall want the students to get out of this class? Okay, and it's just one thing. And the objectives are very specific ways in which you're going to get there. So how are you going to meet your goal? So for example, okay, how many of you remember Bloom's taxonomy? That's it? No more hands? Okay, well, what Bloom's taxonomy does is basically they talk about educational goals at a variety of different levels. And the levels start from kind of the lowest to the highest, okay? So the knowledge base, and it's on your, it's going to be on your sheet there, and I'm not going to go into Bloom totally, but basically what Bloom was saying is that there are different levels of learning, okay? And based on those different levels of learning, there are going to be different measurable types of learning objectives. So just at a very basic level, all right, there's a knowledge base. That's where most of us are starting. So if you even look on your handout, there's a whole bunch of verbs there that talk about, or verbs that you can use to come up with a learning objective. Now the goal, okay, what do I want to do in this class? The class is going to be on the basics of EMDR. Okay, so the goal might be for that class is that by the end of the class, students will be able to walk away with an understanding of the very basics of EMDR. It's very simple. Now, the word understanding, you can't really measure that, right? How do you measure if somebody understands it? That's okay to have that kind of language in a goal, all right? Students will be able to, compare and contrast a variety of different theories that were taught within this class. Okay, that could potentially be a goal. Now, objectives are going to be much more specific. Okay, things like students will be able to document. Students will be able to. What are some words that I have here? Okay, students will be able to to describe, okay? Students will be able to list, okay? Those verbs can be measured. And how can you measure them? You can measure them by testing them. You can measure the goals by reading a paper to see if they did it. You know, it's kind of like when you go to school, you've got a rubric, right? So a rubric is a way of measuring if the objectives have been met. Right? So when you're writing your goals and your objectives, you want to say, how would I measure this objective? What's the tool that I would use? And then if you can say, this is how I would measure it, then you've got a measurable objective. The words here, there's a whole bunch of words here. There's a website that's listed here that is really good, that helps you write learning objectives. And then Beth, you give a link to the APA. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, and those websites really are meant to help you. What I am going to do at the end of the session, if you guys are working on any of your courses, I would be happy to sit down with you and just help you put together a goal and some learning objectives using some of the verbs that are here. Okay, so we will have that at the end if you want to do that. And then we'll come back to questions about this.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, we do have lots of resources too. There's lots of websites out there that are really good. So if you guys need more resources, just let us know. We'd be happy to share those. So we're going to talk a little bit about citations and references now, which we discussed earlier a little bit. For the knowledge base for your course, you do have to have citations and references to back that information up. So a good number, because people again ask, how many do I need? So I think 3 to 5 is a good number to shoot for. But again, as Debbie said, as long as what you're providing, backs up that information and can be followed up on, I think it doesn't really matter. I mean, some people I've seen some people do pages and pages and
yeah.
pages of citations and references, which is great, but you don't have to provide that.
The other thing too that we're looking for, I mean, we're not going to critique APA styling in your references, but APA format for your references is really important. Instead of just putting down, the book of X by so-and-so, it doesn't necessarily give us enough information. So as much as you can use APA format in your references, that is really helpful.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, just as you in school kind of had to cite and reference
Right.
in your papers, to be able to give people the ability to check up on those references is a good thing to do. And people ask a lot, what do the references or citations need to be? They have to be books. It can be books, articles,
Journal articles, peer-reviewed articles, just anything that supports, that legitimately supports what the content of the course is.
I'm going to write my question down.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Writing questions down.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure people have tons of questions. So CE regulations require the information and programs presented are based on, again, the 4 knowledge bases. And applicants should indicate at least one of the following apply. So the program content has obtained credibility or demonstrated by involvement of the broader psychological practice, education, science communities in studying and applying the findings, procedures, or theoretical concepts. So when you're thinking about what citations and references to provide, this is the kind of stuff they're looking for, established concepts. Program content has been peer reviewed, published, support, and beyond these publications. I think it's important to use sources that are legitimate and have been peer reviewed. And then program content has been supported using established research procedures and scientific scrutiny. Program content is related to ethical, legal, statutory, regulatory policies, guidelines, and standards that impact, the practice.
Right.
Anything else you want to add on citations?
No,
and references?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, great.
And I know we'll have questions.
Yeah, I'm sure we do.
Yeah.
Again, you won't be able to see this. It's tiny up there. But this is the APA style references, and they talk about how to cite different sources, articles, books, stuff like that. So again, I have this website that I can send you, and it's also in this PowerPoint presentation. So it's a good resource, because some people, say, oh, it's like in school when you referenced a paper and I didn't go to school or or whatever. Like, there's information out there to be able to help everybody.
And then a good resource too that I use a lot with my students when I'm teaching is the Purdue OWL is a good resource for APA formatting. It's kind of like a sort of like Cliff Notes for APA formatting. The other thing is when people are using websites for references, they need to really know how to reference a website in APA format. It's not just putting down www. And so there's a whole format on that too that I think is important to know.
Yeah, that's huge.
Purdue, P-U-R-D-U-E. P-U-R-D-U-E, OWL, yeah.
Oh, and then like an owl.
OWL, oh, yeah. O-W-L, yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right, so now we're going to get into instructor qualifications. And this is straight out of the CEPA program manual and of course the BBS regulations as well. And this hasn't changed from before. It's still the same. Course instructors have to meet at least 2 of these qualifications. So they can have all 4, that's awesome, but as long as they have 2, that qualifies them. So again, you as the provider, it's on you. So whatever your method is for hiring instructors, we have a question in the initial application about that. We really want to know your method because we need to make sure you have a sound method of making sure that this person is who they say they are, that they have the qualifications that you need for them to meet this. So those are there. It's on the CEPA program manual section as well in instructor qualifications. So another true or false question. I want to give out some of this candy. A course instructor can get CE credit for their own course. True. Yes, that is correct. Do you want to?
Oh, who answered it? Come get your candy. I'm afraid my microphone. Come get your candy.
That is true. I get this question a lot from people, and the BBS regulations, which are right here, state that if a licensee teaches a course, they can claim credit for the course, but it can only be one time during their renewal period for the same class.
So it's the next 2 years, you do it again and then use that again?
That's correct, but it's only once in that renewal, in that renewal period. And people ask, well, what do I need to do for them? I mean, you kind of need to treat them the same as any other attendee. They should sign in, because there should be a record of that. They get a course completion certificate, you know, and it can be signed by you, the provider, or the provider designee. So all of those same things the instructor should do in order to get that credit. Okay? So another question, true or false? All courses must be a minimum of 30 minutes in length.
False.
All want candy.
Candy for everybody. The answer is false, yes. Courses must be a minimum of an hour. So people ask all the time, well, you know, can I offer, you know, an hour and 30 minutes or, you know, an hour and 15 minutes? That's fine as long as it's a minimum of an hour and it has to be a minimum of 50 minutes of uninterrupted instruction. People get confused about that one because they think, oh, I just have to provide CE for 50 minutes out of an hour to give people an hour of credit. Not true. It has to be an hour of instruction to give an hour, but it has to be at least 50 minutes uninterrupted. So if you're going to give a break in an hour course, you have to wait at least 50 minutes before giving a break. So that's what that means. Breaks and meal breaks can't be included in time awarded. So I know under the BBS, I think a lot of people were offering credit for 10-minute breaks or whatever, but that's, you know, can't happen. So people say, well, what do I do? Well, you can extend the length of your course to, you know, build in time for breaks, or some people just don't offer breaks. And I mean, if people walk out of the room, you can't really help that. But again, you know, break time can't be included in that. And again, when people ask, well, can I offer an hour and 15 minutes? I'll tell them, yeah, you can. I wouldn't recommend doing that because, you know, your attendees, what if they get to the end of their renewal cycle and, you know, they had taken a course that was an hour and 15 minutes and they need 15 more minutes of CE to, you know, make their number. Like, that's super frustrating.
Yeah, I know.
So I would keep it in hour or half hour increments, but again, that's just a recommendation. It's not a requirement. So there's also 3 ways, according to the CEPA program manual, that you should verify attendance participation. And that's with an attendance roster. You should have that, and you should keep that as part of your records. A sign-in sheet, and we also recommend that that be a sign-out sheet as well. I think that helps keep people honest.
Accountable, yeah.
And then you have the record there. They signed in at this time, they signed out at this time. There's no question, they were here for the entire course, they get credit for the entire course. And then of course the evaluations, because it is a requirement that they fill out an evaluation before they can get their CE certificate. So again, that helps you ensure that you're meeting the BBS regulations, which state that you have to have a mechanism for evaluation. So it's a little, you can't get your certificate until you turn in your course evaluation. And then you can always, I mean, some people do them anonymously and that's fine, but if you don't, you can go back and say, well, here's the evaluation. This person attended the whole course because we have their evaluation. Okay, so speaking of records that you have to keep and maintain, again, this is a question in the initial application that people often get wrong, and I have to send it back. But this list is in the CEPA program manual, and that question in the application should just be copy and pasted, really. It's what records do you have to maintain for your program? These are them. And they do have to be kept on file. It can be hard copy, it can be electronic, that's up to you. It does have to be kept securely, but that's totally up to you. So, another true or false question. This time raise your hand so we know who gets the candy. Providers shall maintain records for a period of at least 2 years. False.
False. Does anybody
Trick
know the
question.
number? No,
It's a
no.
trick question.
4 years. 4 years.
It's 4
Yeah.
years. It's 2 years for the licensee. So they need to keep their records for 2 years because that's their renewal period. But for providers, it's 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
Yeah, and you can keep them longer, that's fine. I have some people that say we keep them
10 years.
indefinitely. Yeah, whatever, that's up to you. But it is a minimum of 4 years. And I don't remember who said actually false there. Was it you again?
Who said,
A lot, yeah.
come get your
I
candy.
didn't bring enough candy.
Claim your candy, I've got 4 pieces.
All right, so
Here for if you want it.
that is the requirement, and here is the BBS regulations there. So again, it's 2 years for the licensee and 4 years for the provider. All right, another one. And again, raise your hand. All providers must have a policy developed to deal with grievances from attendees. Oh, everyone raised their hand and then said true. All right, yes, that's true. You are all absolutely correct. You must have a policy. And a question I get a lot, and I don't know if anybody in the room is an individual provider, if you're all with an organization, but individual providers sometimes think that they don't need to have a policy because they're just an individual, therapist or whatever offering courses, but it is a requirement. It's from the BBS guidelines. So whatever your policy is, that's up to you. It does need to be a policy that has a timeline and checks and balances to make sure that you're dealing with grievances ethically, because it could be, a grievance could be a number of things. It could be, the room was too cold, or it could be something that they have a problem with the content of the course, or something like that. So individual providers, I think especially, should have a grievance
Yeah, especially
policy.
because a lot of what we've seen is, well, if anybody, no one's ever had a grievance, but if they did, they can call in and we'll talk to them. That's not enough of a policy. So what happens when they call in and where you take it, that's really what your policy becomes.
Right, and a lot of people say, well, I don't even know where to start. CAMFT has a grievance policy available, and you are welcome to adopt that policy. It's actually a policy that a lot of organizations use, and you can adopt that and make it your own. So that's available at camft.org/grievance if you want to adopt that as your own. And again, I recommend having a timeline, like we'll respond within 2 weeks, or we'll acknowledge it within this time, and then resolve it within this time. And you do have to keep a record of all grievances, because you have to report those to CAMFT. And then, of course, if you're ever audited or anything like that, you could be audited by CAMFT. You could also be audited by the BBS. They'll want to see that, and they'll also want to see an explanation of how you resolved the grievance. So keep records of everything, and that's to protect yourselves. Another true-false question. All right. Providers must meet all applicable local, state, federal standards, including the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. True. That's a pretty easy one. But yeah, that is the requirement. So, people have questions a lot of, what is that?
As I say, I have a lot to say about that one.
You do? Oh, okay. All right. Well,
Do you have a slide?
well, I just have the next slide is
Okay.
what the BBS regulations state. But go ahead with you.
So one of the things I've noticed on the applications a lot is people will say, we will provide wheelchair accessible rooms or whatever it is. And that's not enough. It needs to, you really need to state that you do meet the ADA requirements. There are all kinds of disabilities that are out there, right? We automatically sometimes think people in wheelchairs, but people with visual disabilities, people, who are hard of hearing, people with cognitive disabilities, learning disabilities. I mean, you don't need to go through every list and say this is what we do, but it needs to be clear that you do accommodate and provide what the ADA is asking for. And that people always forget that one.
Yeah. Well, you have to have,
There's a question right on the application.
in the initial application,
Yeah.
there is a question about this, but you as a provider, just so you know, you should have a policy developed, of kind of, for example, it has to be on your promotional materials. That's one of the requirements. But you should have a process, like people, must give us 2 weeks notice, or, whatever it might be. And a lot of people have a question about what's my responsibility, like what is ADA and what's my responsibility? Like, let's say I'm an individual provider who's doing this in my home, and like I'm, I don't have a lot of money, and if somebody, is hearing impaired and they want an interpreter, like I can't afford that. That's expensive. The ADA really means to your best of your ability that you'll meet special accommodations. So if that's going to cause you or your business financial hardship that you can't handle, then you won't be able to meet that special request. But if you're able, like CAMFT, for example, at this conference, we are able to provide interpreters. We're able to do that. So if people give us enough notice, we hire interpreters. So it's what is reasonable for you to provide. But you should make it clear what your policy is for your attendees and how they can request those special accommodations. One of the question on that in the initial application is, tell us how you inform attendees of their ability, and that's part of the question that people miss a lot. Is they don't tell us, in our promotional material, because that's a requirement. So the answer to that question would be in our promotional material, and we'll meet all local, state, all the, requirements.
And again, that's a statement that you can just copy from the, it's in the CEPA book.
Yeah,
Just copy it and
program
definitely just put it in.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the CEPA program manual, and I think a lot of applicants think, oh, I can't just copy information from that. I have to like change it and make it my own.
No, you
No.
can copy it.
Just copy that stuff, especially those checklists. Like, that's really, a lot of the questions in the applications are really just making sure that you read the manual and that you understand what the requirements are.
And that's what I said at the beginning, have the manual with you as you're filling out the application, so you can go right back and forth to it, because it really answers almost everything for you.
Yeah, yep. All right, so ethics. This is another big part of the application, I think. And a question a lot of people have a difficult time with, just answering how they're going to ensure how their courses, meet ethical standards, how they make sure that the instructor is going to do that. And this is language copied straight out of the CEPA program manual. So again, this is information that you can include in that section of the application if you haven't filled it out yet. But it's also something just good for providers to know that these are the kind of things, these are the ethical standards that you should be following. But you should also have a method for making sure your instructor is within the standards. So whether that's, you having them submit their material to you ahead of time, their PowerPoint, so you can go through that, whether you have a policy developed that you have them read and sign with this kind of information from the manual.
No, I think that's the thing. A lot of providers will say, well, we follow the ethical codes. And again, that's not really what the question is asking. The question is asking is, how are you making sure that your instructors are following the ethical codes? So do they know about them? So I think what Beth was saying, even to have them, sign something that they read it, how is it incorporated, have a conversation, how do you incorporate these into your courses, and then just tell us that part. That's the piece that people always miss.
Right, and again, I think it's easy to say, oh, well, the instructor, that's on them, but no, it's not. It's on you, the provider, the holder of the number. So you always want to make sure that you're following up with your instructors and making sure, you know, everything falls within the guidelines. And again, we kind of already talked about this, but question 17 in the application is asking how will you ensure, you know, courses train clients to treat, licensees to treat clients in an ethically and clinically sound manner.
Yeah.
So pretty much we already
That's that
went
piece,
through
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in the CEPA program manual, the previous slide. So you can go to that and get some information on that if you need to. Okay, so that actually concludes the presentation. So I did list the CEPA website here if you'd like to go there. It has a lot of good resources, and I think people miss those a lot. There's a tab there that's CE Provider Resources, and it has templates.
It's really good, yeah.
It has
really good.
tips for writing co-sponsorship agreements if you're, you know, doing a co-sponsorship with another person or group. So it's really good. It even has a certificate template, and you can just use that, you know, if you want to. So really good. I listed my contact information here. I'm pretty good about getting back to people on email pretty quickly, even if I'm not able to answer phone calls right away. I love helping people, so if you have any questions, let us know. We
Yeah.
have wonderful CEPA committee members that volunteer their time and offer to help people. So if it's something I can't help you with, because I do have my limits, you know, we have...
Gives out phone numbers.
I give out other people's contact information. So just let us know. That's, I think the beauty of being a CAMFT CEPA approved provider is, you know, I feel like we offer a lot of resources and
Yeah.
guidance. I can't speak to the other approval agencies so much, but we're here for you guys. And if you need anything, help developing anything, you know, let us know.
The thing too is, I think when you get your approval and when you go to a course that's approved, you can really know that it's a quality course and be really proud of what you're offering. You know, it seems like a difficult process that we've put together, but be proud of the classes that you're offering because they're good.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like something I hear a lot from applicants is, you know, this process was so hard and so frustrating, but at the end, they feel really good and they feel like they really
Learned something.
learn
Yeah.
something and then are providing a really high quality program that they can be proud of. So I think it is a hard process and you should definitely pat yourself on the back when you get through it. And you aren't alone. Everybody has the same struggles and, you know, same issues. So it's, you know, everybody's in the same boat and we're kind of learning together and we're figuring out the way it's going to be now.
And we want, the committee, we want you to get approved. You know, we're not there trying, you know, we're not trying to be real critical and grading a paper kind of thing. We want you to get approved.
Yeah.
So we do everything we can. When a good application comes through and you go, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. It's
It's great. It's a good feeling, yeah.
But yeah, people tell me all the time, like, oh, fingers crossed. I'm like, you don't have to cross your fingers. Like, we want everybody to succeed.
Yeah.
And we will fight with you to get it to where it needs to be if it's not there already. So, yeah, I think that's the end of the presentation. So we're
Can I
gonna.
get an endorsement about that?
Of course, you can give
Yes.
an endorsement. Let's give you
Okay, let's get some.
And you and I communicated.
Hold on.
This is
Hold on. We're gonna try to get everybody.
Okay, this endorsement on the recording.
Yeah.
So.
This is the, get the endorsement on the recording, got it. My name is Susan Borkin, and Beth, you were instrumental in your feedback to me. Every time you wrote something back, it was very obvious you wanted me to get this approved. You were kind, you were efficient, you wrote back quickly. I'm also in graduate school right now. It was not the same experience. Everything for my institutional review board is challenging. I hope no one from my school is listening to this recording, but the difference was unbelievable to me. I felt through the emails that you were there, and I just want people to know that they help you. They're not just saying that. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Susan.
great.
I'll
give her the pat on the back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So yeah, those questions you've been writing down the whole time, we're going to get to those. So just make sure that you're loud enough so the recording can pick you up. And
Hi,
ask
I'm
away.
Jennifer Jaffe. I'm from Esalen Institute. And hi, Beth. Also, you helped me a lot, and thank you very much. It's nice to see your
Thank you.
face.
It is. It's so nice. I email with all of
I know,
you,
to see people,
and
yeah.
like to put faces with names is really cool.
Yeah. So Esalen is a unique circumstance in that we're a retreat center, and we provide courses that are designed for professionals to attend, but we also have lay people attend. And I wanted to know, there was a slide way back that talked about that it's got to be, and this was a BBS requirement, that it has to be for professionals only. And I wanted to know where that's at in terms of a course that is for professionals, but lay people choose to attend because they can.
Right. And I think that's the important, distinction there, is as long as you're developing it for, lay people can come if they want to pay and come to your course, that's great, more power to them. But it's developed for, the licensees. I think that's the important thing. And as long as, again, your educational goals and your learning objectives are specific and they meet those requirements, then you're covered. And thank you, Beth, for volunteering to be our,
Room monitor.
yes, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Nicole. I'm from Felton Institute.
Nicole.
What happens if your records are damaged or lost in some way?
That's a good question. I think a big part of, the application, there's a whole section on maintenance of program records. And, people might think that's a little repetitive, the committee asking so many questions about how you keep your records secure. But that's the reason is, we want you to not have issues like that. And of course, things happen. Let's say, you keep a flood, a fire, but your responsibility is to keep them secure to the best of your ability. There are some things that are going to be out of your control. They're out of everybody's control. And, I think the BBS in an instance like that would be understanding of, obviously, as long as you have a process. And, I always think it's a good idea to have a manual for your program that details your policy on things. And, if you have that manual, you could say, this is how we keep our records secure. We had them locked in a filing cabinet in this facility and we had a fire and so you have that kind of stuff to back you up and to protect you. I always tell people a lot of the things here are to protect you as the provider, documentation and things like that. So yeah, it's a very good question. And again, it's up to you how you keep the records. You don't have to keep electronic records. You can just keep hard copies, but that's another way too. Electronic, again, things can happen to that
Everything
too,
can happen, but I've learned the hard way to really have a backup. And, I even find with hard copies to just, depending upon quantity, to just be able to scan it in now. Everything's in the cloud, and, that's a really good backup, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. True.
Hi, I'm Connie from Kern County. My question, I have a couple questions, so I'll just do the one. On the references, I had an instructor that got a lot of their course material from interviews with victims, and built their course, included that in their reference material. What is the best way? Is that APA, does that cover interviews and client type discussions once they have that?
It does. There is a way to cite that, and if you go to the reference, and I don't know that offhand, but there is a way to just put down their interviews. There's the date, the type of interview it was, but it is in the manual. It may not be on the Purdue AL, but it is in the manual.
Great. All right, thank you. And if anybody has some copies of promotional materials and how to get all of this information, on a nice one page, I would be happy to take copies or get information on that, because
That's
we've
a
got several different agencies that we're CE providers with, and we offer the credentials or the hours with all of them, to include now the state with children's providers. So anybody that has really good promotional material, I'd be happy
And we,
to take those as well.
just like we have the course syllabus that I have permission to share, I do have permission from some providers to share their promotional material. And I've seen people do really awesome promotional
Yeah.
material where I mean, people can get it on one page and it's beautiful. And then we have people that send
Pretty bad stuff.
pretty bad stuff and many, many pages. There is a way to get it all on there. So yeah, and that is something a lot of people struggle with too. And a requirement that has changed that I'll mention too, for people who are offering internal trainings, meaning you have staff and it's only your staff that you're providing to. You don't open it up to outside people. You don't have to have the promotional material with all those requirements. We do, however, recommend that whatever you're sending out to them, whether it's an email or a posting on, whatever your software is for the company, that you use the statement, the CAMFT statement that says basically you're responsible for the program and all its content, and then the BBS sentence that says this course qualifies for this many hours of continuing education. Those things are pretty important whether you're doing a full-fledged promotional material or not. But again, that has changed. So I guess that's happy news to some people. I see some heads
I know, I heard that.
shaking here in joy. So that's a good thing. But again, if you switch and you do open it up to the outside, it does need to meet all the requirements. And then just on promotional material, because that's a good topic that we didn't really cover too much in this presentation. Again, everybody kind of has a different situation, but for people that are doing like co-sponsorships, I know you mentioned with different programs and stuff like that, you might have a co-sponsor that's doing the promotional material, but I know I sound like a broken record, but
You still are the provider.
You're the provider, you're the holder of the number. It's still your responsibility to make sure it meets the requirements. So however you do that, if you're sending them the manual and then you're checking it off, or depending on your program, I think once you have a template created, it's pretty easy to just go in there and update the information for each course. Another question we get a lot is, let's say you're advertising on social media. Do you have to put all those requirements on social media? And the answer is no. I mean, if you're going to send a postcard, that's fine if you're going to post on social media, but it does need to direct back to wherever you do have all those requirements. So if you have a website that has all the requirements, you should say, for complete details, visit this website.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
This may sound almost naive, but oh well. I have a colleague who I think has an older, what is it called? Providership or whatever.
Provider number from the BBS,
Yes.
yeah.
And she insists that when I do this, it has to be associated with an organization. CAMFT is now that organization, right?
So CAMFT is the approval agency.
That's what she said you had to be associated with a school or a,
No, that's not true.
You're it. You're our guy.
Yeah,
Is that right?
so it used to be the BBS that approved everybody, but they don't do that. There are 7 total approval agencies.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how to say this. I'm just going to say the first thing that comes to my mind. They're not all created equal. So some of them are, for instance, the APA, NSAS, NASW.
Yeah.
So most of them are national groups. The only 2 local California groups are us and CPA. And CPA mostly focuses on psychologists, obviously, but they do, I've talked to them and we have a good relationship with them, and they do kind of understand that they are approved by the BBS to do this. With the national groups, I don't have a lot of confidence in them, honestly. I've called the APA, I've called some of them, and the APA flat out told me, we don't do that. And I was like, are you sure? Because, I mean, the BBS thinks that you do. It's kind of a big deal. So, and I've had a lot of people call them because they say, oh, I'm approved by APA, so I should be good, right? And I say, I would call just to make sure. And then they call and they tell them, no, we don't do that. So I don't know what the situation is with that, but I would err on the side of caution. That's what I always tell people. Like, you know, your approval with CAMFT, we're only in California. It's very specific, but we do all the 4 BBS license types. So just like it was with the BBS, your approval with CAMFT covers the same thing.
The other thing that it sounded like your friend might have been saying to you when she said you need to be associated like with a hospital or an organization, you as an individual can be a provider.
Yes, that's what I understood.
That's absolutely, yes.
I mean, I can do this on my own now. I have all
Yes.
this stuff, it's complete, and now I can run this class.
Yes.
Me.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and I get that question too. Anybody can be
Yeah.
a provider. You don't even have to be a clinician or, you know, anybody. I could be the provider. I couldn't be the instructor, but I could be the
Oh, I see.
provider.
It's more of the administrative part is what you're
Right.
saying. Okay.
So as long as, you know, I could have Beth CE going on, but as long as I, you know, have legit instructors that meet the qualifications and I'm meeting all these guidelines, I don't have to have any, you know, special designations or anything like that.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
That's different, isn't it? Did the BBS require that that be licensed?
No, they had,
Oh,
she
yeah.
just did the BB.
Can you repeat your
Yeah, go ahead.
question?
Sorry, the question was, isn't it true, is that different from, my understanding was when the BBS was doing it, it was required that a licensed clinician be involved in the administration of the program?
As far as I know, that wasn't the case. I don't pretend to know everything for sure. I, you know, haven't been around all that long.
I don't know about the part if the BBS required there needed to be a licensed provider. I know that the BBS did allow individuals to be providers. Because I was one of them for a while, but I don't know if they had to be a licensed provider in the administrative part of it. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
Our former person who did C wasn't a licensed person.
yeah, and another question I get too is, does the program administrator have to be a licensed professional? And
No.
that doesn't either. The program administrator really is the person that's saying, I'm going to be responsible for this program and making sure it meets all of the guidelines, and I'm the contact person for CAMFT, because that's huge. As some of you know, we send out reminders 3 months ahead of time, and if you have a program administrator that left and their email bounces back, or you moved locations and your letter comes back to us, because we send it in letter and email, I don't have a way to get a hold of you. So letting us know who that program administrator is a big deal. I unfortunately spend a lot of time trying to chase people down and figure out who took over and who I should be contacting. But most people, because we make a pretty big deal of it in the application and the manual, have been really good about notifying us. And all you have to do is send an email and just say, the program administrator was this person, it's now me or this person, and here's the contact information. And that's all we need. Yes. Oh, and look at you.
So do all classes have to be pre-approved by CAMFT, or do you do the first one? And then how will the audit process or the check-in process and frequency occur?
That's really good questions. So the answer to the first question is no, not all courses have to be specifically approved by CAMFT. When you apply, you're providing one sample course that you're being evaluated on, and then once you're approved, you can develop as many courses as you want. Part of signing that acknowledgement page, which I talked about earlier, is saying you're going to make sure all your courses meet the requirements. So that's your contract with us. We're not going to check up on you at every turn. Having said that, we do have an audit process, as did the BBS. And you could be audited by us. You could also be audited by the BBS. If they see something that makes them worry or scratch their head, they have the ability to audit you. So that's why my recommendation is just always play everything by the book. You have your records, just have a good process. Every time you have a course, just kind of follow the same routine, have all your records set, because then if you're audited, it's super easy. You have everything set there. You know it meets all the requirements because you're using the same templates. And as far as CAMFT auditing process is, after you are approved on your first year renewal application, that's when you begin to be eligible to be audited. And you could be audited at any time. And we'd ask for information on some of your courses and some detailed information on that. So, just always be aware that can happen, and we could be checking up on your stuff. So just, make sure you're sticking to the guidelines,
Yeah.
and you'll be safe. Did that answer the question about audits? Okay.
Are there any rules or anything about payment? In other words, this is for me, the first course I'm teaching is part of my dissertation. It is in fact the study that'll be used for my dissertation. I'm not going to charge people. What they get in trade is the units, and then they take the class for free. Is that illegal or not kosher or any of those things?
There aren't any guidelines as far as
They don't have to pay or, yeah.
charging or not charging. That's up to you.
Okay.
Again, we don't police that. We just, what we're interested in is that you have a refund policy if you are charging, because again, really to protect you, to protect the licensees as well, because numerous things could happen with that. You could offer a course that somebody was really unhappy with, and they took the course, but then they want a refund, but as far as that, there are no requirements. I mean, I think a good chunk of our providers actually don't charge for events, and the reason why
In-house trainings or something is?
the reason why is a lot are in-house trainings, and they're companies that offer to their employees, and that's included. I mean, for individual providers, I mean, you're in a different situation right now with your dissertation, but I mean, just me personally, I would definitely charge.
Yeah, I think
you-
most people do.
Yeah, you have to cover your expenses. I mean, this, CAMFT is the cheapest as far as the approval agencies, but it's still a lot more expensive than it was with the BBS. And that's all across the board. So, I tell people, like, attendees are going to understand if you have to charge, because you have to be able to cover your costs and make it, worth it for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have what I've called a training development worksheet that I send to all the trainers that I am working with, that has all of the stuff that I'm going to need for the camp, for the flyer, for the everything, and I'm happy to share that. It's a Google document, and so we work on it together to figure out fees, to figure out everything, and only the trainer and I can work on it. We put objectives. I've got a link to the thing that you gave for how to write good objectives. So
That's great.
I don't know if anybody's interested. I'm happy to send it to you, and then you can share it with whomever you want.
Great.
So
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's
great,
a
yeah.
great
Thank
idea.
you.
And that's
Yeah.
something I've thought about trying to put together. So the
Yeah.
fact that you've done that is brilliant.
It's really helpful. So I'll send it to you, and then, okay.
That's great. Perfect. Thank you.
We also
Hi, my name is Renee Chiasson, and I'm with Telecare Corporation.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. So we just developed an application that's a SharePoint, on SharePoint. So anybody that's going to be submitting a class, they fill out an online application, and I can share that as well.
That would be great. Yeah.
that's awesome.
And what we did was kind of mirror your application in terms of what the requirements were, and then
Perfect.
uploaded templates for, the evals and all the different things that anybody would need, the subject matter experts, if they're submitting a class. But now that I have the microphone, I do have a question.
That's awesome, though. I think it's really great that people want to share with one another to help them out.
yeah.
That's really, really good.
For
Yeah,
sure.
so thank you for that.
It was a lot of work creating
Oh,
that.
yeah, absolutely.
Anybody have to do that again?
So I took over for our program administrator, and I'm not even the person that's going to be our program administrator. How do we know when we're up, when we have to submit another application? Do I just check with you directly, Beth, or?
Well, so when you have to submit, well, how do I say this the easiest way? So when you're initially approved, you get your certificate. It's good for exactly 1 year. So the date of your expiration is the date your provider number ceases to be worth anything, basically. Which is why we notify you 3 months ahead of time to give you enough time to apply and be approved before your expiration date.
Right. I just don't know. I don't have any idea where we are in the process. Never saw an invoice or anything.
You can always email me or call to find out when your expiration date is if you don't know. But it's, if you can find the certificate, it's on the certificate. And then again, that's why it's so important to notify me of a change. And even if you have a temporary program administrator, still let me know, because then I will change that contact information, and then that temporary person will get everything.
Okay.
So you get an email with the notice letter, the invoice, and then if you were approved with recommendations, which those of you who have already been through the process know what that means, you'll get a copy of that original letter so you know what the recommendations are that you have to respond to. And then we mail that letter too. So we're hoping that between the two, it gets to where it needs to go. So from the initial application, it's 1 year. The first year renewal application is due, and then from that point, in 3 years from that exact date, it's due again. And again, 3 months notice would be what we give. And then that brings up a good point, because people ask a lot, like, let's say you were up for your first year renewal and you submitted less than 60 days before that expiration date, because remember, the committee has up to 60 days. It doesn't always take 60 days, but they do have up to that. What if the committee's still reviewing it and your expiration date comes up? The fact that you've already applied and paid your fee covers you basically. You can't offer CE after that date until you're approved again, but the penalties come in for people that miss the deadline to submit, which is the expiration date. So we do have a little grace period, but again, that's why we try to give notice. And generally, it's at least 3 months. A lot of times, we'll send the notices at the beginning of every month, so some people get a lot more than three months notice.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then one other question, because we span over 8 states and we're pretty spread out, do you provide a list of people who are providers who offer CE approved programs or training, anything like that, so that if we're a larger organization, we can reach out and say, hey, we need something in Southern California on this?
We don't have a list. The list that we have that's on our website is our approved providers. So if you're an approved provider with us, you're going to be on the website under Find a CE Provider. We don't have a list of like other providers or anything like that, or
instructors, I should say.
Oh, instructors.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, we don't facilitate that at all. I mean, you could always look at our list, and individual providers are usually under their first name. So, it'd be Beth Biggs, and you would know that, well, that person's an instructor, and you could contact them that way, but we don't facilitate any of that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Nothing
I
else?
thought there was going to be a lot more
I know, I did
questions
too.
in this.
Yeah.
Anything at all? Because questions, I feel like, is the most helpful part of this, I think.
I feel like after going through both APA and this application, I'm feeling pretty good.
You know everything.
I don't. One more question. We work a lot directly with developers of different models. And so they often have their peer-reviewed articles are their own. Is that okay?
I'll let you answer this one.
I want to say sometimes, but what I wanted, because I think what it shows is, with their own articles, it shows practice knowledge. And so for that reason, I say, yeah, that would be okay. But I would also like to see other things that supported their own stuff as well. Does that make sense?
And if it's something that they developed, I mean, they should be able to provide you where they got that from, you know? They had to be influenced by something, and yeah.
Like I remember reading one application with somebody who was just kind of creating their own thing, and it really wasn't, I don't even remember what it was, but there was nothing to support what he was doing. He came up with his own theory of X and wanted to present it, but there was nothing substantial to make that concrete and legitimate. No questions about learning objectives? If people want to stay, or I don't know, if it's 3 o'clock right now, if you want to talk about learning objectives individually, as a small group, I mean, whatever you want, I'm kind of here to kind of help you guys do that. Okay?
Okay, yeah, so if nobody has any other specific questions, thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. It really says a lot of.
One more question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry.
So, and Beth, I asked you this in an email privately, but I just want to clarify a little bit.
Okay.
We do a leadership series, and our director of nursing and our director of rehab and our directors of social work all attend these classes. And as far as I'm concerned, by having them go through that, it absolutely impacts their practice and impacts the clinicians, because they're doing clinical supervision and they're doing all of those kinds of things. But what if part of the class is on something that is like employee motivation, and only a portion of it is on like clinical supervision and that piece? Do we just break out the actual hours that we're spending on the clinical piece, and then the rest of it we don't? So if it's a full day of training, we might just do 2 hours.
Yeah.
So they would get 2 CEs.
Yeah, I would do that and just be very clear about what is being offered for course credit and what's not. And especially too if you're doing a full day thing, because a lot of people say, well, what if somebody has to leave early or whatever? Technically, the regulations are that they have to be there for the whole course or they don't get credit at all. So.
Oh, I don't let them leave.
Yeah, I would think, either say, the first 2 hours are for CE credit, and, or if you're trying to get them to stay the whole time and that's your nugget, however you want to schedule it in there, just be really clear about what's for CE credit and what's not. And then on that same note, I'll just mention, even though nobody asked, people have like conferences that they, offer credit for, like CAMFT. Obviously, this is a 4-day conference, but we break it down per course, and we do that because of that reason. If we made the whole conference the one course and people left early, or things happen, they couldn't get credit for the whole course. So, people say, I have a series that I'm offering. I always recommend breaking that down by day or whatever it is, because, that'd be a really unfortunate situation if somebody had something come up and they couldn't finish the series and then they just couldn't get credit for it at all. And then having said that too, they would have to be present for the entire course, or if you have a way for them to make it up, then you could do that as well. But that would be pretty tough, I think. If it's being filmed or something like that, or, there's a distance learning component, that might be easier. But, again, I think that's pretty hard to do. Nicole? Did we answer your question completely,
Yeah.
Renee? Okay.
Just to follow up on what you just said, because we almost always record all of our trainings in case someone does miss it, we can offer them that. But if you're not specifically approved for distance learning, does that still count?
That's a great question too.
That's really good.
And the answer is, once you're approved, you're approved. On the application, there is a distinction between let us know if you're face-to-face or distance learning. And we ask that just because distance learning does have some unique characteristics to it that you need to consider, and that's really why we're asking that. The BBS, however, does not distinguish between face-to-face and distance learning. The regulations are the same for both. So you can, if you didn't let us know you're going to do distance learning, you can start doing that. We just ask that, like on the first year renewal application, there's a place to tell us about changes to your program. You would explain that, like, we started offering distance learning, and I might go a step further and, talk about maybe the format and how you determine course credit. I think the committee would like to see things like that. But yeah, and especially for something like you're doing just a recording, that's really straightforward. It's going to be the same as figuring out face-to-face for as far as like course credit you're
Hours
offering.
and stuff, yeah.
But like, there's a lot of other formats that, that involve readings or, different things. So if you are offering a course like that, you do have to have a method for determining what that is. Like if it's a reading, you should have like a word count formula that you're using, or you would use test pilots to kind of figure out how long and use an average of what it's going to take someone to finish that. Because you can't just say, oh, however long it takes you, we'll give you that much CE credit. So there are some unique distance learning things to think about. But yeah, as far as BBS regulations, there's no
approved.
distinction.
I have one last question.
That's good.
That
Questions
sounds
are
really good.
So why aren't CEs offered for leaders who are working in healthcare, who are growing to be leaders and lead other clinicians and other people within the organization? Or is there, because they're clinicians, so they have to keep up with their stuff so they can continue their licensure, but why wouldn't we be able to do things that are not specifically related to like an evidence-based practice? If it's a leadership component for those clinicians who are in leadership roles.
Are you talking about healthcare? Because I think what we're talking about here is when we talk about courses that are specific, it's specific to our field as marriage and family therapists.
Right. But in marriage and family therapy, though, we still, because we do social work and we do a lot of that type of work within telecare, we're just a larger organization, and I've got people who are therapists, who are licensed therapists, who are leaders now in an organization. And my question is why would we not be able to provide CEs for the things that are helping them lead their other therapists and clinicians?
I would think that if you could directly link it to the fact that it's working with the therapist, the focus isn't on leadership, the focus is on leadership of the therapist and working with the other therapists, I think you may be able to get that to go through.
Okay.
But leadership as a concept in and of itself, leadership in an organization, isn't necessarily specific to the field of marriage and family therapy. I think that would be different. Does that make sense?
What about like clinical leadership or clinical supervision? We do
Clinical supervision is definitely part of what we do here, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just be, I mean, there have been other people in your same shoes, obviously. And as long as you, again, can tie the educational goals and specific learning objectives back to, in a way that they would meet those requirements, I think that's the important thing. And again, what we're trying to do here is meet the BBS regulations. So, they make the regulations. They're the ones that came out with that kind of change in,
Right.
it can't be self-improvement kind of stuff. I mean, that's coming from them, and that even hurt CAMFT. I mean, because we offered a lot of courses like that. So we're all trying to like figure out how to fit in there and meet their requirements. And there's definitely some areas I wish were a little more flexible, or, but as long as we can, be confident that if you were audited by them, your course would be able to pass muster. Anything else? All right, I think that's it. Again, thank you guys
Thank you
so
very much for coming.
It's been amazing.
Thank you.